Hi there. In this video, I'll be teaching everyone how to use Microsoft Visio to create an entity relationship diagram. This is a skill you'll need to have in order to do Lab 3. So to get started, in order to get Visio, if you don't have it yet, you can either get it from the Microsoft DreamSpark website, and I explain how to get to that website in my video that's called Getting Microsoft Access, because Access and Visio can both be procured through the DreamSpark website. Or you can use Remote Lab, which is also explained in my Getting Microsoft Access video. So assuming you have the program, let's start it up. So this video will talk about how to use Visio version 2013. Actually, if you're using an earlier version, you'd be better off looking at the lab manual for directions, because Visio is one of the few programs that has actually changed a lot between versions. Specifically, version 2013 is a big change from version 2010. Microsoft really changed around what Visio could do and how you go about creating a data model. So this video is really for people who are using the 2013 version. So what do? After you launch Visio, you're going to choose the crow's foot database notation template. Create. So now you have a blank screen. Let me click this little box here to unhide my tools window. Or actually this one. Good. So here I have my space where I can create my ERD, and here I have my tools. Let me show the ribbon here. So the first thing you should probably do when you create a database diagram, it usually looks better when it's in landscape orientation. So go to Design and switch it to Landscape. So now what do? Well, first let's talk about what we are going to model. I figured what we could do is model a database that has just a few tables, and let's do a model that has some one-to-one relationships and one-to-many, and also let's see what we would do if we needed to model a many-to-many relationship. So we get started by creating tables. To create a table in our diagram, you're going to grab this entity box and drag it on the screen. I'm going to zoom in a little. To do that, click on View, Zoom, and maybe I'll go to 100. So this box represents a table. In the blue here, up at the top, this is where we would put the table name. So, in Access you have the design view where you name your table. So here, it's the same thing. What do we name it? Well, let's create a database that is going to track activities of salespeople and sales. So let's call this a salesperson table. Now, just like with Access, we have to specify what column should be our primary key. Let's just say we're going to create a salesperson ID field. In Visio, when you see fields that are above this blue line here, that means those fields are part of the primary key, and this PK means primary key, just like Access has the little key icon. So we've got a primary key. Let's add some more attributes, just like you would in the design view of Access. Let's have salesperson first name, salesperson last name. You notice I break the name up. That's something you always want to do in your data models. Now if I want to add more attributes, I'm just going to grab this attribute line here what you need to do is drag it where you want it to appear in your table. If you want it at the bottom, just let it hover here so you get an orange line. Let it go. Let's do salesperson, middle, initial. We'll just start with that. Ordinarily we would have a lot more fields, but just for simplicity. So the next thing we should do is let's decide what fields are required. Well, foreign keys should be required, so what we'll do is just click on this salesperson ID area, then right click and say, you notice it already says set primary key. That was a default. Let's also say it's required. All that does is make it show up in bold. Let's do salesperson first name required and salesperson last name also. We'll leave middle initial as optional. The next thing I think we should do is let's create a table that will have a one-to-one relationship with this table. To add another table to our database, let's just drag over an entity. Now, in databases, it's somewhat rare to have one-to-one relationships. Usually, things will be one-to-many. But I just wanted to show in what type of case you'd actually have a one-to-one relationship. Let's call this the company vehicle table. So what we're going to do with these two tables is we want to track which salesperson is using a given vehicle, and conversely, which vehicle is being used by a given salesperson. So, company vehicle, let's do company vehicle ID. That's the primary key. Let's make it required. Now, you might notice that I don't specify data types. That's something you can't do in Visio 2013 at least. The interesting thing is that in Visio 2013 they actually took away a lot of features. You can do a lot more in the earlier versions. Let's just say this is company vehicle make, company vehicle model. We can make these required as well. So how do we relate these tables? What we want to do is for each salesperson we want to know if there's a vehicle that they are currently using. So what we need is a foreign key. We have this company vehicle ID field here that identifies a vehicle. Let's put that same field in our salesperson table and make it a foreign key. To add an attribute, again you drag attribute over here, hover it over the bottom of your box until it turns orange, let it go. Okay, so what do we do now? Next, let's mark this as a foreign key. We'll right click here and say set foreign key, and you notice we get a little FK box. Now we're not going to make this a required field because some salespeople may not be currently using a vehicle in their work, so we will not make this required. But we do want to have a relationship between these two tables. Now in Access you would go to the relationships window and you'd grab one column and drop it on top of another column. However, it's a little bit different in Visio. By the way, let's just save this, just in case. Okay. Now, if you want to create a connection between two tables, grab a relationship line and let's drop it here. So, the first thing we need to do is make these connector symbols a little bigger. These are very hard to read how small they are now. So what you do is you click on this line, right click, select Format Shape. Here you'll pick Line, and we'll make the size here of the arrow at the beginning and the end jumbo. Otherwise it'll be pretty hard to read. Now what this is showing now, if you've read the readings for this week, hopefully you'll understand what it's showing. It's showing a one-to-many relationship. On this side we have one and only one. That's what those two lines mean. And here we have zero or many. But we actually want to have a one-to-one relationship, because we want to say if they're, any salesperson can have 0 or 1 cars, and any car can be used by 0 or 1 salespeople. So what we need to do is actually fix this part of, we need to fix both of the crow's feet areas. The crow's feet is just called that because you can see it has little lines that look like feet. The crow's feet part is just the two end parts of the line. So we have a one-to-one and a zero-to-many. We want to make both of these sides 0 or 1. To do that, click on here, right-click. Actually, we're already there because we already have this properties window up. So what we need to do is let's go to Begin Arrow Type, and we can choose which one. Let's find the one that shows 0 or 1. Okay, so that says 0 or 1. Now we have to change the end arrow type. There's a lot of options, so there, good. So now we have the correct types on each side of the relationship. Now we just need to connect these lines to the tables. So what I'll do is I'll click on the very end here. I'll drag this. Now what's recommended by Microsoft is that you actually connect the line to the entire table, not to a specific field, and that's a little different than Access when you actually chose which field in each table the primary key was connecting to. But here what we'll do is we'll drag it, and we'll keep dragging to the left until the whole table lights up with the green border, and we'll drop it. And here we'll grab the edge and do the same thing, drag it, drag it. Okay, we got one column lighting up, let's move it to the right. Okay, now the whole table has the border, let's let go. So what I like to do usually is move my tables a little bit so the line is straight if possible. There we go. So we've established a one-to-one relationship between this table. Now you'll notice this connector is kind of pointing somewhere between the first and last name field. It actually doesn't matter where it is, whether it's up here or down here, which is different than in Access where it does matter exactly where the line comes in. But just remember that in Visio it doesn't matter. Just remember that it's connecting where this foreign key field. That's the field that we're going to be using as the foreign key. It's a little strange and different than Access. In here we have this field is kind of connecting where this line is, but again it doesn't matter where exactly it's connecting, it's just going to connect right in the midpoint of the table. So you just have to sort of remember that company vehicle ID primary key connects to company vehicle ID foreign key. So we have our one-to-one relationship. Now another kind of relationship that databases have, which is the most common, is the one-to-many. So let's say we want to keep track of the sales for all of our salespeople. How do we do that? First of all, I'm just going to hide this window to make a little more room. Scroll down. Maybe I'll also hide my ribbon. Okay, good. We need another entity. Now, I'm going to create a sales entity. So that represents each time a sale is made. Oops. Now each sale is going to have sale ID as a primary key. Let's make it required. And what do we care about with a sale? Well, let's say sale date time is one thing. We have to keep track of that. Make it required. And the other thing we want to do is for any given sale, we want to know who is the salesperson responsible for that sale. We'll make a rule that each sale could be linked to only one salesperson. However, each salesperson can have 0 or many sales. So that's our one-to-many relationship. So here, we're going to put a foreign key to the salesperson table. Let's put in salesperson ID. Let's make a business rule that says all sales must be connected to some salesperson. In other words, we're going to make this required. Oh, and we also need to put on the foreign key option here. Okay. So now we have our sale table. Now you may be wondering how we'll keep track of what actually is being sold during this sale, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So what's next? Next, we need another relationship. Let's drag it over. First, let's make our symbols bigger by going to Format. Let's make the arrow types jumbo. Now in this case, it's defaulting to a one and only one to many, which is actually what we want. So we don't need to change these symbols, but what we need to do is connect the many side of the line to the sale table. Keep dragging down until you get the whole table. Good. And then the one side is going to point to the salesperson table. Keep dragging. There. So what I'm going to do is zoom a little bit out so we can see a little more, maybe 90%. Okay. I think this line down here is the bottom of my page. Let's drag this up a little to make more room. Just using the arrow keys to fine-tune where the table is. Try to make these lines straight there. Now I'll bring the sale table up. Okay. So now what we have is we have it set up so that each sale is for one and only one salesperson, and each salesperson can have one or many sales. I'm sorry, 0 or many sales. What's next? Now we've done a one-to-one, we've done a one-to-many. Finally, we get to the question of what do we do when we have a many-to-many relationship? Let's create another table, and we'll call it item. So an item is something that can be sold. So let's do item ID as a primary key. Oops. Trying to make it required. And let's say that each item has an item description and an item price. I can make both of those required. Sometimes it takes a few tries to click on the right thing. Let's hide this to make room. So what I have is a sale table and an item table. Now these two actually have a many-to-many relationship because one item can be sold in many different sales, and one sale can contain many different items. Now, if you were making a higher level ERD, you could just use the many-to-many relationship symbol. However, when you implement this in a database, like Access or SQL Server, what you actually have to do is create another table called a bridge table that will store the relationships of sales to items. Now, in your lab 3, I mentioned you'll have to create a bridge table in order to do that lab. So definitely pay attention to this part so you'll know what to do there. So we're going to add another table, and when you create a bridge table that connects to other tables, usually you give it the name that just combines the name of the two tables it's bridging. So we're going to call this sale item. Let's move this over. Just going to make a little more room. For our table to sit in here. Okay. So what we'll do, and what you have to do in a relational system with this many-to-many relationship between sale and item, is put an in-between table. So instead of having a many-to-many relationship between sale and item, what we'll have is a one-to-many from sale to sale item, and another one-to-many from item to sale item. So now we need to add relationships between the sale and sale item table and item and sale item table. But first we need to fix the columns in the sale item table. Now our primary key in the sale item table is going to be made up of sale ID and item ID. So it will be a composite primary key. So sale ID, I'll just drag this line, drag this line down, since we always want our primary key fields to be above the line. And I don't need this last attribute. Actually, you know what? I do need an attribute there, because I need to know how many of that item were sold in each sale. So we'll call this quantity. Now, both sale ID and item ID will be primary keys and foreign keys. So first I'll mark item ID as a primary key. Then I'll mark both as foreign keys. And finally, all of these columns are required. So I need to set them all as required. Okay, so this table keeps track of what items are sold in each sale and how many are sold. So now let's just make our relationships. Maybe I'll just copy this relationship line because this one is the same type that we want to use. So on the one side we have our sale table, and on the many side we have our sale item table. Just move this up a little. And let's get one more relationship line to connect item to sale item. So again, the many symbol has to point to our sale item table, and the one symbol has to point to our other table. So now these are connected. So I hope this video was helpful in teaching all of you how to create Visio diagrams for database models. And please don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions. Have a good day.